Hey, folks, welcome to today's conversation on leadership and culture. I have had the distinct pleasure and honor over my whole career to work for some pretty amazing and with some pretty amazing leaders in organizations that have some iconic brands and some remarkable cultures. My passion, my mission is to help fast-growing organizations and leaders all over cultivate and lead strong, healthy, authentic cultures. I personally just finished a run as a very fulfilling and purpose-filled run as the leader of people and culture at the Harvest Group, where I helped them scale from 25 teammates in one location to nearly 250 teammates in many different cities, 5 offices in 2 countries. And it's honoring that experience where I've launched the Culture Collaborative Cohort. It's an experience for people and culture leaders to come together and really focus on those skills that it takes to really build and sustain strong and healthy cultures and strengthen those cultures as organizations scale their operations. As the series suggests, we're going to spend most of our time talking to leaders that have unique experiences across the whole spectrum of organizations, whether it's goods or services organizations, small or big organizations, fast growing or steady growth organizations. That's our focus, is leaders in lots of different kinds of organizations. Consistent with the majority of my own personal career, many of those conversations will focus on the CPG and retail space, and today's conversation is no exception. So let's talk about some leadership and culture. I will tell you, I am excited for today's conversation with my friend Bryson Moss. Bryson's a senior director. He leads a big part of their category management operation on their Walmart global customer team. He has been with P&G for a little over 21 years. We'll get to hear about that in a second. He lives in Northwest Arkansas, and he leads a team of about 20 direct reports. And then, of course, they touch many more people on the Walmart global customer team and beyond. Bryson is unique for a couple different reasons. One, all 21 of those years have been with Procter Gamble since he graduated from the University of Missouri. And so while he's had a consistent view of a particular culture, that culture has evolved like all cultures do over time. And so I'm excited to hear his perspective from that unique seat of being within one organization in many different offices, many different geographies, but that one organization, and how his leadership has really grown and developed over that. The other reason I'm excited to talk to Bryson is over the last few years, and by the way, I've known Bryson for all 21 of those years at P&G. I've had the chance recently to hear Bryson speak a few times about, particularly as a leader, the importance of loving others at work and loving people on your team and loving at work. So that will be the focus of our conversation today, is what role that love plays. And I know that's a fun, crazy word, sometimes hypercharged word, but what does love mean in the context of building out an organizational culture? So welcome to the conversation, my friend, Bryson Moss.
Thank you, Steve Blair. It is great to be here. Humbled and honored.
Awesome. Well, man, I appreciate you coming. I'm going to kick us off with just a handful of kind of the more overarching culture questions, and then we're going to dive in a second and talk really about that focused area of loving people at work. Yeah. Bryson, as I mentioned, you've had an opportunity to be in one really healthy culture. I experienced it, at least at 17 years inside P&G as a healthy culture. Based on that, do you have your own personal definition of kind of what culture is? What does the word culture mean to you from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think culture is an overall set of beliefs and behaviors that guide how a group of people interact with one another. I think culture is experienced more than it's seen. I think culture is incredibly sensorial. At P&G, we may say, talk about it in terms of the smell of the place. Mm-hmm. And I think culture, that it's anywhere you have multiple people, you're going to have a culture, whether that's good or bad, whether that's your family, whether that's an athletics team, or whether that's an organization like P&G.
Yeah. I may have mentioned this in a previous conversation, but one of my favorite definitions is culture is what you get when you leave people to their own devices. And that can vary across the whole, organization. Bryson, as I mentioned, you've had all of your post-collegiate experience has been at P&G. So you've had a number of different team experiences. Thinking back across those experiences, and even maybe before that, I know you're an athlete on some sports teams. Can you remember one of the earliest experiences that you've had where you noticed the impact that a culture can have on a team of people or on an organization?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest shock I had from a culture standpoint. So I started my career at P&G in Des Moines, Iowa, worked on a customer team, very small customer team. There were 4 of us calling on Hy-Vee, and then moved to Kansas City to call on AWG, and then moved to the Walmart team. And I would tell you that those customer teams have their own unique cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit of a culture shock for me in 2007 when I moved to Cincinnati and took an internal assignment with P&G. And that was a completely different company than what I'd experienced up to that point. And it wasn't a bad culture per se, where it was toxic. It was just very different, and not, we weren't operating at the same level that we were operating at on the customer teams. And I think a lot of that was driven by the fact that the organizations, the functions within P&G were very siloed. There was definitely a power struggle that you could feel, and you weren't necessarily rooting for one another and trying to go after a common goal. Whereas on a customer team, you very much were and are. And you were more worried about the Targets and the Amazons of the world than you were worried about trying to get ahead versus finance or marketing as a salesperson internally to get what you needed to go to market. So that was pretty eye-opening for me. I don't know if you had a similar experience.
I was going to say I had a very similar experience. In fact, in my conversation with Nick last time, we talked about the different levels of culture in inside a bigger organization. At P&G, for example, you've got that kind of that master culture of overall P&G. It's rooted in the values of the organization. You hear about those every step of the way. Then you get onto a customer team, and there's a very different culture. It's supportive. It's aligned with the overall culture. At least my experience in P&G was, but it was different. And in our cases, it was stronger. It was a more cohesive culture. I would argue that might be driven by the fact that remote teams need to band together amongst themselves when they're outside of the mothership. You know, they're this kind of like we're out here together. And then you've got that third level of culture, which is the team that you're on within that customer team. In your case, you lead category management for health and beauty. I'll get to this in a second, but that's like the third level of culture, because Bryson, your team has a unique culture within the Walmart team's culture, within the P&G culture. And so I definitely agree with you that I've experienced all 3 of those differences as I moved throughout the P&G organization, for sure. Hey, here's another question. If you think about organizations that aren't organizations you've been in, so think of teams, companies outside of your own personal experience. Have you come across any that you think are a really great example that you look to emulate, or that you look to learn from? Organizations outside of your experience, what's a culture that you admire or a culture that you watch for inspiration?
I think a couple I look at. One, Chick-fil-A, and not just because I love their chicken sandwiches, but you get a consistent experience every Chick-fil-A you go to. And it's something that they're doing from the top down, the way they treat their employees. You can tell they feel cared for and loved. And then that experience passes on to their customers, and you feel that. So Chick-fil-A is certainly impressive in the way they go to market. And then one that just came up this week, I was listening to a sports radio show and thinking about this interview this week, or this conversation, and Clemson football. What Dabo Swinney has done at Clemson. People talk about the culture that he's created in his 15 years there, and this we versus me mentality, where it's a family and they're focused really on the team, and it's not about individuals. And you can see that show up in their success. And even when they have issues, like this last weekend, they benched their starting quarterback, and a freshman came in. The team doesn't fall apart. They're not divisive.
Yeah.
They've got a we versus me mentality. So
Yeah, those are two great examples. I think about the Chick-fil-A example. How many thousand outlets, and the world of quick serve food, how hard it must be to maintain that consistency of culture across, all 50 states, thousands and thousands of outlets with different, hourly managers and assistant managers. And man, that is a great example, Bryson, of a culture that I look to as well to try to learn from.
Yeah.
Hey, last question before, well, go ahead.
Bad for me because we just had one open in Springdale, and that was interesting as a takeoff. You're wondering, will this one be as good as the others in the area? And it's amazing. It's amazing how efficient they are and how well they train their people.
No joke. Man, you're making me hungry. Give me some Polynesian sauce or some sriracha and some nuggets. All right. Hey, last question before we jump into our topic today. I'm a big fan of tools to help me understand who I am and what makes me tick, whether that's Enneagram, Strengths Finders, Predictive Index, Working Genius is my new favorite. And I know that P&G buys into a lot of those assistants, that kind of assistance in helping leaders figure out their own leadership style. Based on your experience with those, is there any unique threads that inform or I would say predict your culture as it relates to the results you've seen in those assessments? Anything that makes Bryson uniquely Bryson that comes out in those assessments?
Yeah, my wife loves Enneagram. I'm still trying to figure it out, but she's an 8-wing 7. She tells me I'm a 6-wing 5. But at P&G, we leverage Strength Finders.
Strength Finders, yeah.
Yeah, and I've taken other personality tests over the years, and I always find them fascinating because I think one of the hardest people to know is yourself. And you want to ask who you are, just ask your family. But I think we can lie to ourselves a lot. So it's been fascinating for me to get to understand more behind that and how I think and how I tick.
Yeah.
And it's helped me as a leader. I think for a long time, I thought that I needed to be someone else to be an effective leader. And I think what Strengths Finders especially has taught me is I just need to be me. I need to bring those strengths every day to my people, to my organization as a whole. And that's what's going to help me be the best leader that I can be. I think the other thing that I've learned is that I can't manage or lead my organization holistically. I've got to manage or lead my people individually based upon how they're wired and who they are and what they need from me. And so I try to manage each person based upon their unique strengths. And that's something, we've done on our team in a big way. And then on our micro teams, just we'll have strength coaches come in and do these full day sessions to really help us go deep there. And that's been super helpful for me as a leader. And I know across the organization, it's been helpful.
So think about that. You show up a certain way because that's who you are. And so you have a leadership style, you have a leadership personality, but the other half of that equation is you've got to meet your people where they are. And so you can't do that you can't do that by losing yourself. You've got to stay true and authentic to who you are, but you've got to first understand, then react to what they need. I love that, man. That's great. Hey, to put you on the spot, is there any particular strength of yours from Strengths Finders that informs a part of how you build a culture in a team? Like, would your team, if I ask your team, hey, Bryson has built this team, this culture, these are his 5 signature strengths. What would be something they would all say is like, oh yeah, well, that he does this because he's that.
Yeah, I think so. My top 5 strengths in order are belief, harmony, responsibility, relator, and connectedness.
Wow.
And so I think
you might be the first person I've ever met with belief as number 1.
Yeah. So I think my team would say, wow, that shines through.
Yeah.
See, that face a big part of who I am, and I don't shy away from that at work. But harmony as well. I try to create a family environment within our category management team and try to have a harmonious existence in this crazy world where every day, you're going to run into problems. So how can I help as a leader create harmony amongst the group? So I would hope my team would say those things shine through.
Yeah. Well, actually, we've got 3 of them with us today, and we're going to. Hey, all right. So speaking of category management team, let's shift into kind of your day-to-day leadership of a team. Walk us through kind of the structure of your organization and how that plays in the bigger P&G Walmart Global Customer Team organization.
Yeah.
Just help us get a flavor for what the landscape looks like for you.
Right. So I'm Senior Director of Category Management for Beauty, Health, and Grooming. So I've got 6 direct reports and then another 14 people underneath those 6 direct reports.
Got it.
In my organization, I've got a counterpart, Robin, who leads the other half of category management. So she has about 20 people as well. So a total of 40 people in category management that we co-lead together.
Got it.
Which has been great because I come from a sales background. She comes from an insights background. The group refers to us as mom and dad. We've got the pleasure of serving as category advisors in 27 different modular categories at Walmart.
Wow.
So that's great. And it's interesting because you've got this P&G culture, but we also feel like we're tied into Walmart and their culture. And I want the merchants to feel like we and my people are part of their teams.
Yeah.
We're obviously spending the majority of our time with them, just given the firewall and nature of how we see them as advisors. We are, 40 people of a 220 person, global customer team. And so it's unique being in category management because you are firewalled. So we have a separation of church and state there with confidentiality of data, and but we're also part of the culture too. And I want my people to be part of the P&G culture and get everything they can from P&G while they're in Northwest Arkansas. So there's a trunk and treat at the office later today. We'll participate in United Way.
I remember those.
The P&G tailgates, LPGA tournament and things like that. So I want my team to kind of have that balance of both.
Yeah, Mike Grain in the chat asked a good question. With that firewall and with your strengths being belief and then specifically harmony, that's got to be a delicate road to balance because you do respect, and obviously you respect that need to stay separate from the category advisorship standpoint. But your value of harmony, I have to assume, draws you to want to work together, right? And want to help the company grow while you have that firewall. Is that a challenge for you?
I would say 5 years ago when I started, it was more of a challenge because you're coming out of this culture for 10 years where I led the baby care team, where you're all about a number and you're chasing a number and you're looking at, yesterday's sales every day. To now, I'm focused on what's right holistically for Walmart. And if P&G benefits from that, that's great. But ultimately, we're serving the customer. And I know that if we do what's right for Walmart and the customer, that inherently there will be a halo effect for P&G. And hopefully all the suppliers that are calling on Walmart in that category. Because if we're growing the total pie, then that's a good thing for all of us. And selfishly for me, as someone that wants to stay in this market, it behooves me to ensure that Walmart's doing well. So that's where I find the balance for me. Yeah.
Hey, you mentioned you and Robin co-leading with each of you having kind of half. What's that dynamic like? Because again, you all are within that Walmart Global Customer Team culture. Then you have a category management culture, and then there has to be an element of Bryson's culture and an element of Robin's culture because you all have unique teams. What does that dynamic look like? Do you and Robin come together and say, hey, here's the culture we want to create for all of category management, but here's my unique personality stamp, or hey, here's a lane that you can lead, Robin, to bring uniqueness to that? What's that look like?
Yeah, I would hope our Catman team would say it's one culture, that it's not a Bryson culture and a Robin culture. We all sit together. We We all have weekly category management meetings together where we, talk about what's hot on with Walmart and share, best practices across category advisors. And then we bring our own unique strengths to that. I'm obviously the eye candy. No, but yeah, it's been a really good, co-leadership experience, which honestly, when I took the role 5 years ago, Robin's been there a little over a year. Stacy Tolkien was there for 4 years before that. And same, both of us are very, very patient, humble people that don't have egos, just want to serve Walmart and serve our people and figure out the best way to do that and leverage our strengths and skills to do that.
Awesome. Hey, you mentioned serve people. Now we're going to talk about love, a topic that we all love. It's such a charged word sometimes, and there's all kinds of different definitions. I think for the purposes of today, we can all agree that we're not talking about romantic love. We're talking about agape love or like just general human condition love. How would you describe the love at work that we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've looked for a lot of different definitions, and I still don't think there's a better one that I found than the one in 1 Corinthians 13. And this is the one that gets quoted at marriages or weddings a lot. But I mean, reading it just this
patient,
week,
kind. Yeah.
Right. So love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. If you think about that, and if you take out the word love and replace it with my manager or my colleague, you want to say those same things? Like, my manager is patient, my manager is kind, my manager always protects, always trusts, always hope. I mean, I think it's such a good definition. And it's something that you have to keep in front of you. Like, am I being all these things to my people?
Yeah.
To my colleagues? And guiltily, I think sometimes it's almost easier for me to be those things to my people than it is for me to be those things to my wife or my kids, which is, just a little bit incriminating. But yeah, I still think that's the best definition.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I could come up with a better one. And the fact that you put, my manager in there, man, that hit home. That's big time. So would you say, P&G has a really strong values-centered culture. Would you say that love at work and the way that you described love would be consistent with kind of the P&G value structure? I think it would, coming alongside people, being patient, being kind. There's no disconnect there, right?
No disconnect. I think it's one of the things that drew me to P&G, and one of the things that's kept me at P&G for 21 years is that aligns with my value system. And I've certainly experienced that in my career, and continue to today. I think, and P&G puts such a big focus on culture. I mean, there's an annual survey every year that goes out that's you get your culture scores, and something we measure and track against, and senior leaders get, compensated based upon that culture score. So I think it's great that we hold each other accountable to that too. And I think for a company that for a lot of years was promote from within, we had to pour into other people because that was our lifeblood. If we didn't invest in our organizations, we weren't going to be around as a company. And so I think that's been maybe not unique at P&G, but certainly a core part of P&G.
Well, to your point, you the way you phrase that, they used to be 100% promote from within. I've seen P&G recently hire a fair number of leaders, everyone, including leadership from outside the company. How has that dynamic impacted the culture? Has it impacted the culture?
Yeah, I'm sure it has. And I mean, in talking to folks that have come in, I know that there's been a disconnect and that P&G is trying to work through where those people don't feel as connected as maybe someone that was an intern or hired out of college.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's something that the company's having to work through and try to get better at. Um, I haven't felt a shift for me where the company feels different because now we're bringing in
Sure.
folks from outside of P&G, but I think it's more for the folks that we do bring in that they maybe aren't experiencing the same P&G that I'm experienced or I have experienced. And so I think it's upon me and others to ensure that they do. We're
Yeah.
more inclusive and welcoming and ensuring they feel that family atmosphere.
Well, the good news is your recruiting process is as robust as ever. So, and I know culture is a big part, and values are a big part of that process. So, I don't imagine there's many folks sneaking in that aren't aligned for the most part with the values and the culture that you've built. But you're right, coming in is a pretty big culture shock for some that come
Right.
from other organizations. Hey, I want to ask you, without sharing, sensitive or personal information. Obviously, other folks are going to watch this. Can you give us an example of what love has looked like for you? That you've experienced the love of a manager, or you've experienced the love of a teammate in your career. Can you give us an example again without,
Sure.
divulging anything personal?
Sure. Yeah, a couple that come to mind, and these are probably the strongest examples, and maybe because they were first impressions with P&G. But I'll never forget interviewing with P&G as a sophomore in college, and interviewing with a guy by the name of John Brazzi, who you know as well.
I do.
And going through that interview and giving all the examples that I had, and at the end of the interview, John was incredibly nice, but very direct, and just said, "Hey, look, you know how to answer all the questions. You just don't have anything to talk about. Go back and get involved in this organization, and come back and see us in a year." And that was the most loving thing he could do because he told me the truth. He
Oh,
didn't
man.
sugarcoat it. I mean, but he did it in a respectful way, but he told me the truth, and that's all you can
Yeah.
ask. Um, Another example, and I'm not doing this because you're interviewing me or talking to me right now, but I'll give this example to anybody, is the night before my final interview in Cincinnati. I'm staying at the Westin downtown, and you called me, and you went over interview questions with me just to make sure I was comfortable. And you gave me an incredible piece, and you didn't have to do that. You had a family of your own. It was probably 9 o'clock at night, my time, 8 your time. And you took the time to help me out. And so that was incredibly loving and selfless of
Oh,
you.
man. Thank you for that. That's, yeah, I recall that night. You helped me recall some of the details before. I didn't know all of them. I don't remember all of them, but yeah, I thank you for saying that. That's a piece of me. Like I don't know when this will air, but I've got a call today at 5:00 with a young man who's going through the interview process for an internship at P&G. And he's asked me for some help on how to prepare for that interview. And I'm like, heck yes. I can't wait to have that conversation with him. Man, that's awesome. Okay. Flip the script now.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of a time when Bryson loved well, when you came alongside a teammate, a direct report, a manager? How have you loved well in your experience there?
Yeah. I can't think of like a big time, but I can think of little times. And I think loving well.
But I'll tell you that they're probably not little to the people that you
Sure.
did them with, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think loving well is about being consistent, because to develop a great culture or love well, it can't be the exception to the rule. It has to be the rule. And so one of the things I do with any of my direct reports is, when we have our join ups, we won't talk to business first. I truly want to know how you're doing, what's going on in your life. Like, let's do a personal well check. How are you? How are your family? Tell me about your kids. Like, I want to know that. I want you to bring your whole self to work. So that's one thing that when my managers do that and authentically want to know about who I am, and what's going on in my life, that feels caring to me. So that's something I try to do with my direct reports. I think over the past couple of years, especially, it's something I've done throughout my career, but even more so, people have kind of struggled with the pandemic and just being virtual, but just life continuing to happen. I've had direct reports that have gone through infertility over the past couple of years, or divorces, or health issues. And one of the things I do with them is I'll pray for them in that specific situation. Whether they believe in prayer or not, I'll ask them if it's something that they're okay with me doing. And I've never had anybody turn me down. And I've had people come back to me after that and say, wow, I've never had anyone do that for me. And that may be the most loving thing that anyone's ever done for me.
Man, that's great. Well, actually, my next question was, now that we've all navigated the pandemic, has there been any unique change in how you love your folks at work in this new world of hybrid? I know P&G is not in the office every day. You're in the office more than some, but you're not in the office every day. Has the pandemic impacted the way that you love folks?
For sure. And I think it's really hard to love and create a great culture virtually. I think that
I agree.
We've learned that it's really hard.
Not impossible, but it's difficult.
It's difficult. No. So I'm very thankful that P&G is back in the office, a few days a week, all in days, and as much as people want to be in, and taking advantage of those all in days. So I think being super intentional on the days that people are in, to make sure that I go and see them face to face, just have a drive by, even if we don't have a connect that day. Just to catch up, because honestly, that's one of the things I miss the most, is just the cube chatter of what's going on and how quickly you could catch up on what was going on in the business and in people's personal lives just by what you were hearing there in the office in the cube farm. I think being more intentional about creating time for fun and celebration. So as our team checks in modulars right now, we're heavy modular season across most of the health and beauty business for the mods that'll go down in next spring and late winter. We're doing happy hours for every time there's a mod turn in, and we're just going to go
fun.
And we get together, and folks, we'll let that team that turned in the mod just kind of give a quick 5-minute recap of what this mod season was like for them, and then that's the last business we talk. Everything else at the happy hour has to be personal. So no P&G talk, no Walmart talk. It's just all personal. We'll typically have a table question just to go around and so everyone gets the chance to talk, and we're all there. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. Another thing that I've done, and I used to do it before, but it's changed how I do it, is I always like to write thank you notes, like actually write them out to folks. But mailing them now and sending them to people's houses, to their home address,
as opposed to just setting them on their desk.
Right, because you don't know if they're coming in or not. Especially during mod season, people will be up at the layout center for weeks or months at a time, and so mailing it to them, just saying how appreciative I am of them, and maybe a project that they've led or work that they've done, calling that out. I think that's a way that you can show love in this hybrid environment.
Yeah. Man, I know one of the cheesy meme posters I've seen a lot is, love is spelled TIME. I know that's a passionate area for you, is like just being present with your folks. How do you do that in a world where there's never a lack of priorities, never a lack of to-do list items? How have you found ways to be present?
Yeah. One of the things I like to say is be efficient with your time so you can be inefficient with your people.
I was hoping you'd say that today, because I will tell you, I've heard you speak before. I have said that maybe 10 times since I heard you say that. I always attribute it to you because you said it to me the first time. Man, that is one of the most impactful perspectives. So say it one more time, And then tell us what it means to you.
Yeah. So be efficient with your time so you can be inefficient with your people. So what that means to me is don't procrastinate. You obviously have a to-do list. And a lot of times we can put things off until the last minute. And my grandma and grandpa used to say, don't put off till tomorrow what can be done today. So if you've got time, knock it out, get it done, because you never know when that fire drill is going to come up for your people. And I always want to be accessible for them. So when they call or when they swing by my cube and say, hey, do you have a minute? The answer is always yes. I've got a minute. I want to be available for them. I think that's, as their manager, as their leader, that's the most loving thing I can do for them, is be available when they need me. Yeah,
man, that's awesome. Hey, we have a question in the chat, so let's cover that one, and then I'll hit you with our final question. Mike asks, hey, P&G and Walmart can have very closely aligned cultures, but what if your values, and maybe this is outside of the P&G Walmart environment that you know, but like, what if your values don't necessarily fit with the company culture or the company values? Think of that as like, maybe it's well, I don't want to get too direct, but if it's a buyer in particular, a particular buyer who may have a set of values that are slightly different than yours, or maybe it's just two companies or suppliers. How do you navigate that when there's a disconnect between your personal values or your personal cultural approach and that of a buyer or a client or another company?
Yeah, I think I think you approach it two different ways. I think if it's your company that you're working for and your values don't align, that's different than a company that you might be working with.
Yes.
And I think even within P&G, my values, my own personal values, don't align with everybody that I work with or that works for me, right? And so that's just dealing with people.
Yeah.
So not all my opinions are shared by everyone at P&G, and certainly aren't going to be shared at Walmart or anywhere else. I think if the values are getting in the way of you doing business or having a relationship, I think sitting down and talking about those things and truly listening and seeking to understand would be the place I'd start. Mm-hmm. Because I think when you do that, you can find more common ground than you can find reasons to be divisive. And I think too often we focus on the one or two things we disagree on versus the 99 things we violently agree on. So trying to find the things you do agree on, I think would be the place I'd start.
That's great, man. All right, last question, Bryson. And you may know this about me, but I'm a big music guy. I always have a song for everything. Can you think of a song that you think kind of encapsulates or captures the energy and the essence of the culture that you're trying to build? And this can be Bryson and his 20 reports, or it could be Bryson and Robin and the total category management group. Can you think of a song or two?
For sure. I think the song that comes to mind is "We Are Family" by
Sister Sledge.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talk about it all the time. And it's total category management. We're a family. We're here for one another. We care about each other. We love each other. If someone needs help, either on the personal side or someone needs help on the work side, we're a family and we look after each other. And I think that's what's beautiful about our group. And I believe people would say that back to you if they feel that. I hope they feel that.
Yeah. Now, I will say the challenge will come in when it's time to give a 3 rating. You don't often give your aunts and uncles or nieces and nephews a 3 rating, but you and I and all the P&G people listening know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, Bryson, anything else you want to share before we end this conversation? I appreciate you being here today.
No, I appreciate it as well. Thank you so much for letting me be a guest, and it's just a big honor for me. So thank you.
I love it, man. Well, congratulations on 21 awesome years so far. And I know that the Northwest Arkansas market and the P&G team are thankful to have you as a leader. So thanks for loving people well, Bryson. And thanks for being a great example for all of us other leaders out there trying to learn how to do it better. So thanks, Bryson.
Thank you, Steve Blair. Always great to see you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. The recording of today's conversation will be online soon. So please feel free to check out Conversations on Retail website to get all of those past recordings, not only of this conversation series, but all of the other conversation series that are available. Go check them out.